I've done my best. But it's the world now. They must do what they can with it. 9. I don't believe you. It's not true, Christine. Simon's information is wrong. I don't believe you, Father. John and Christine stared at each other angrily. It was a miserable, frightening moment for them both. It was a night 3 months after the wedding, and Christine had come with some happy news. She had come to tell her father that she was going to have a baby, his first grandchild. For a while, they had talked about that. But then Christine had begun to talk about Simon's new job. Simon had found some information about the waste products from the paint factory. His information was dangerous for the company. Simon had written an article in the newspaper saying that waste products from the paint factory could be killing the baby seals. David Wilson had written to the newspaper immediately, saying that Simon's article was completely untrue. And so, instead of talking happily about the baby, Christine and her father had argued all evening. John had known for a long time that they would have this argument. And next week, in the town, there would be a public inquiry, when government officials would try to discover the truth. Scientists and lawyers would speak on both sides of the argument. Everyone in the town was talking about the inquiry and about Simon's newspaper article. "Why did David Wilson write to the paper, Father?" Christine asked. "He's not a scientist. He's just a businessman. Why didn't you write to the paper?" "I have written to the paper," said John sadly. "You'll probably read my letter tomorrow." "Oh? What did you say?" Christine asked. John felt sad. He hadn't wanted to write the letter. He and David Wilson had had a big argument about it. But in the end he had agreed. He had agreed to hide many bad things before, so one more didn't make any difference. "I said that our waste products don't make the river water dangerous. We've tested them very carefully for many years, and if they are diluted in water, they are not dangerous at all. There are usually only 1.5 parts per million in the river water, that's all. And the seals aren't in the river, they're out at sea. I wrote that in my letter, and I'll say the same thing at the inquiry next week." Christine was watching him carefully as he spoke. She saw how tired and sad his face was. He was looking at his hands most of the time, not at her. "Father, I want to believe you, but I can't," she said softly. He looked up. "Don't then," he said angrily. "You believe Simon if you want to. He's a journalist after all. I'm only a biologist, and your father. Why should you believe me?" He stood up angrily, walked to the door, and opened it. "I'm sorry, Christine. I've had a hard day. I'm tired, and I don't want to sit here listening to my daughter telling me I'm a liar. Go home to Simon. I'm going to bed." She got up slowly. "It's important, Father," she said slowly. "It's important for everyone." "I know it is, Christine. But the paint factory's important too. It's given a lot to you, and me, and to the people of this town. Try to remember that, and forget about the seals for a while, can't you? There are more important things than money, Father. Are there? You tell that to all the people who work in the company and live in this town. What are they going to live on when the factory's closed because of Simon's stupid articles? Can they give their children photographs of baby seals to eat? Christine looked at him for a long moment before she went out of the door. And what about children who play by the river, Father? What if they drink the river water? What then? Nobody drinks water from that part of the river, he said. And I've told you, it isn't dangerous to children. Christine closed the door quietly behind her. 10. Greenworld. 2 days later, Christine and Simon arrived at John's house. It was very early, 5 o'clock in the morning, and they didn't knock at the door or try to wake anyone up. In fact, John wasn't there. Christine knew he had gone to Scotland to see Mary. He was coming back on the morning of the inquiry. Christine and Simon walked quietly down to the boathouse by the river. Without talking, they put the boat in the water and sailed away across the river. On the other side of the river, they met two friends, Peter and Susan. Their friends were wearing white clothes with Greenworld written on them. Simon and Christine also put on white clothes. Then they all got into the boat and sailed upstream towards the paint factory. It was a windy morning, and the waves on the river were quite big. But Christine was a good sailor, and in about half an hour they reached the factory. Two photographers stood by the river, taking photos of them. "Okay, Simon, where is it?" shouted Christine. "Over there, look, in front of that post," he said. Christine sailed the boat towards the post. When they were near it, they could see under the water. It was the pipe that took the waste products out of the factory. "Okay, here," shouted Simon. Christine turned the boat towards the wind, and Susan caught hold of the post. Then Simon and Peter climbed out of the boat into the water. The water was moving fast here, and they had to hold on to the pipe and the boat. Peter then took several strong paper bags out of the boat. The bags were small, but very heavy, because they were filled with building cement. Peter passed the bags one at a time to Simon, and Simon went down under the water and pushed each bag into the pipe. A few minutes later, the mouth of the pipe was full of bags of cement. Simon came up out of the water for the last time. "It's okay," he shouted. "We've done it. The cement is wet already, and in a few hours it'll be as hard as a rock. Nothing can come out of that pipe now." The two men climbed back into the boat and smiled at the photographers. Then Simon stood up in the boat with Christine and held up a long white sheet. On the sheet was written, "Greenworld. This pipe kills seals." At that moment 2 things happened. A man ran out of the factory shouting angrily, and the wind suddenly became stronger. It caught the sail and sent it quickly from one side of the boat to the other. The back of the sail hit Christine hard on the back of the head. She fell into the water like a bag of potatoes. Then the wind caught the sail again and threw it back across the boat. This time the boat fell over on its side and lay with its sail under the water. Simon was under the sail. The sail and the sheet were all around him, and for several seconds he could see nothing. Then he came up, into the air. He saw a foot kicking hard in the water beside him. Someone was moving under the sail. Quickly, he went down under the water again and tried to help Peter. But Peter caught hold of Simon and pulled him under water too. There was a quick, frightening fight, and then Simon managed to pull them both up into the air again. They held onto the side of the boat together, breathing deeply. Simon saw Susan holding onto the back of the boat. Then he heard someone shouting. He looked behind him and saw the man from the factory. He was shouting and pointing downstream. But Simon had water in his ears, and at first he couldn't hear the words very well. Then he understood. "Look!" the man said. "The girl! She's drowning!" Simon looked downstream where the man was pointing. He saw something white floating far away. It was not doing anything, just floating round and round, like a bag of old clothes on the water. Christine! The river was taking her quickly downstream, towards the sea. Hurriedly, Simon began to swim after her. He was a good swimmer, but the white clothes slowed him down. He swam as fast as he could, but he seemed to go slowly, so slowly. The water seemed heavy, and held him back. For the rest of his life, he would dream about that long, slow swim towards a white body that floated quickly away in front of him. At last he reached Christine. She was floating with her face down, unconscious. He tried to turn her over, but it was so difficult. She was heavy, and her arms fell back in the water when he dropped them. He got her face out of the water, but her head fell backwards, lifeless, and she was not breathing. He caught hold of her face then, put his mouth over hers, and blew into it. He rested, and then blew into her mouth again and again. Nothing happened. He looked around him. They were in the middle of the river, moving quickly downstream. Here it was about 25 meters to the bank, but about 200 meters downstream a second river came in from the left. The bank was further away there, and the water moved faster. Simon was tired and afraid. It had rained last night, and there was a lot of water moving downstream to the sea. The strong wind blew little waves into his face. He began to swim on his back, pulling Christine towards the trees on the bank. He swam for half a minute, then stopped and blew 4 times into her mouth. Once he thought he saw her breathe, but he couldn't be sure. Her face was very white, and he had no idea if her heart was beating. The river was taking them quickly to the sea. He swam harder, kicking strongly with his legs. Nearer, only 5 meters to go now. But the bank was moving past very quickly. There was a tree near the bank. Its branches were low over the water. Simon kicked hard, caught the branch, and held onto it. The water